Happy New Year, everybody, and thank you for joining us for Bay Area Older Adults and Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District's Lunch and Learn at Skyline Ridge Open Space Preserve. My name is Dr. Ann Ferguson, and I'm Executive Director of Bay Area Older Adults, which I'll call BAO for short. BAO is a nonprofit organization that improves the health and well-being of 42,000 adults age 50 plus each year. We trek on nature trails, learn about different cultures, explore historic sites, experience new culinary flavors, and help connect you to people with shared interests. Since 2013, we have taken more than 4,500 older adults who have walked more than 13,600 miles in more than 30 parks. Photos from some of our walks are shown here along with our website address. The preserve we are walking and exploring today is Skyline Ridge Preserve, which is one of the preserves protected by our partner, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, which I will call MidPen for short. I would like to introduce Carmen Lau, the Public Affairs Specialist at MidPen, who will tell you about their agency. Happy New Year, Carmen.
Happy New Year, Ann. Thank you so much for that introduction. And hi, everyone. It's great to be joining you all today. Again, my name is Carmen Lau. I'm Public Affairs Specialist at MidPen, and I'm really thrilled to be partnering with Bay Area Older Adults on this exciting virtual event. Before we get started, I'd just like to share with you a little bit more about MidPen. MidPen's mission is to acquire, protect, and restore the natural environment and provide opportunities for public enjoyment and education. In 2004, MidPen expanded its boundaries into coastal San Mateo County and developed a second mission statement that includes preservation of viable agricultural land use in this region. Next slide, please. MidPen is a public agency created in 1972 by a grassroots voter initiative. We manage 26 open space preserves in Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Santa Cruz counties, with nearly 65,000 acres of open space land and over 24 miles of wonderful trails for biking, hiking, dog walking, and equestrian use. MidPen has 25 preserves that are open to the public all year long. And here is a map of MidPen's jurisdiction, with each of the dark green areas indicating a MidPen preserve. Our boundaries extend from San Carlos to Los Gatos and to the Pacific Ocean, and also from south of Pacifica to the Santa Cruz County line. You can learn much more about us in our open space preserves at openspace.org.
Thank you, Carmen. So let's do a practice question so everyone feels comfortable. So as you can see on this slide, the practice question is, have you ever been to Skyline Ridge Preserve? Answers, of course, are yes or no. So go to the polling tab, make your choice, and when you're finished, don't close the window, just click on the YouTube tab to go back to streaming. So we'll wait a few seconds and see what the overall results are. All right, it looks like about 60-40 ratio approximately. So that's great. So a good number of you have been to Skyline Ridge Preserve. So for those of you who've not been here before, the preserve is located in La Honda. The main parking lot for the preserve is located on the west side of Skyline Boulevard, about 1 mile south of Alpine Road and Page Mill Road, and 6 miles north of California 9 or Big Basin Way. There's a big wooden sign that says Skyline Ridge Open Space Preserve on the road in front of the entrance to the spacious parking lot. The south end of the lot is for equestrian parking, and the north and east ends are for cars. And there's a restroom at the main entrance. Today we'll explore Skyline Ridge Preserve, one of the main one of the many preserves located in the Santa Cruz Mountains. First, we'll learn about Skyline Ridge Christmas Tree Farm Restoration Project, and then we'll take a virtual tour to see wildlife, visit the Chestnut Farm, and Horseshoe Lake. After the tour, we'll have a question and answers session. The preserve has a trail named Tree Farm Trail, and this trail passes through a Christmas tree farm, which you'll see on our virtual tour. Skyline Tree Farm, a family-owned business which began in 1958, operates on 63 acres through a lease agreement with Mid-Penn. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of trees growing there in the winter for people to purchase for the holidays. The Skyline Ridge Tree Farm Restoration Project began in 2003 and was completed 7 years later. The goal of the project was to prevent sediment from polluting Horseshoe Lake, which is shown here. If you joined us for the El Corte de Madera Creek Preserve Tour, you may remember that the Environmental Protection Agency considers sediment the most common pollutant of rivers, streams, creeks, lakes, and reservoirs. In this case, the sedimentation was coming from erosion of the slopes around the lake. Sedimentation can kill fish and their eggs, aquatic invertebrates that fish, amphibians, and reptiles eat for food, as well as other harmful effects on the wildlife dependent on the lake. The restoration project encompassed 13 acres that were formerly part of the Christmas tree farm. A team of Mid-Penn staff, volunteers, and the California Conservation Corps regraded some of the slopes above the lake to prevent drainage into the lake and stabilize the slopes using native plants. Non-native plants were removed so that the entire area could be restored to native grasses, wildflowers, and oak woodlands. Native grass and wildflower seeds were painstakingly gathered from nearby Russian Ridge Open Space Preserve and planted along with hundreds of acorns from 4 different species of oak trees that were gathered from surrounding forest. Hundreds of other native plants and shrubs, such as toyon, madrone, coffeeberry, and sticky monkey flower, were also planted. Horseshoe Lake is an important water source for wildlife and potential habitat for threatened species such as the California red-legged frog. It is the largest native frog in western United States, ranging in size from 1.5 to 5 inches long. Its abdomen and hind legs are mostly red as adults. As you can see, the back has small black flecks and large irregular dark blotches. Adult frogs eat invertebrates, and the larger ones eat mice and other frogs that they find on the water's surface and along the shoreline. These frogs are currently threatened by loss of habitat from invasion of non-native plants, water diversions, degraded water quality, and introduced predators such as bullfrogs. Horseshoe Lake is also a potential habitat for the San Francisco garter snake, one of the most beautiful and the most endangered species of North America. It has a bright teal underside, red and black stripes, and a red head. It was very popular in the pet trade because of its beautiful coloration, which is one reason for it becoming an endangered species. The other reason is its preferred habitat has been taken over by agriculture and other development. The National Park Service and the United States Geological Society are actively researching this snake. The USGS is trying to identify subpopulations of the snake that they can breed in captivity and reintroduce into the wild. Interestingly, the main source of food for the San Francisco garter snake is the California red-legged frog. So now that we learned a little bit about the Skyline Ridge Tree Farm Restoration Project, I have a question for you. What was the main goal, and again, this is emphasizing the main goal of the Skyline Ridge Tree Farm Restoration Project? The choices are, number 1, improve the habitat for wildflowers, 2, reduce Horseshoe Lake pollution, 3, increase the variety of oak trees around the lake. Or 4, relocate the San Francisco garter snake. Go to your polling tab, click on your choice to have it recorded, and then go back to YouTube streaming. Okay, it looks like most people chose reduce Horseshoe Lake pollution. And that is the correct answer. So the main goal of the restoration project was to reduce Horseshoe Lake pollution. So next, let's take a walk along the rolling hills and partly shaded trails from Long Ridge to Skyline Ridge Preserve. This map shows you the route we'll take. We will start on the Peters Creek Trail at Long Ridge Preserve, where there's a small pullout to park a few cars. We will connect to the Chestnut Tree Trail, along which we'll see lots of oak and other trees and shrubs, as well as birds. Then we'll stop at the Skyline Chestnut Farm on the first day they opened last year to sell chestnuts. The owner, Hans Josens, shares stories and history of the farm with us. After our visit, we continue on the Tree Farm Trail and past the Christmas Tree Farm before we get to Horseshoe Lake, where we'll spot some ducks and other waterfowl before heading to the main entrance of Skyline Ridge Preserve. This is about a 5-mile walk. We found a hole along the trail. It's either a coyote or badger hole. Coyotes enlarge existing holes dug by other animals, mainly badgers. Coyotes and badgers sometimes hunt cooperatively because their styles are complementary. For example, if the prey tries to escape by burrowing underground, the badger catches it. And if the prey tries to run above ground, the coyote catches it. So you think it's a badger?
Well, just the shape of the hole is a little bit oblong like that, with a badger digging the way they do dig this way,
Gotcha.
whereas a dog will dig this way, so the hole is going to be more this shape.
So coyote's more like dog.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's probably a badger. Cool.
Track in the back here is a black-tailed deer. It's round in the back end of the and pointy, comes up the narrow point in the front. This track is a little weird because it's so split apart. There's a wide gap between the front ends of the toes, and that's symptomatic of a wild pig.
After a mile on the Chestnut Trail, we reached the Skyline chestnut orchard that was originally planted by a Spanish settler sometime after 1847. This orchard is part of Mid-Penn's land and is managed by Hans Josens, who restored this historic site and is our expert guide today.
When I first got here, the Open Space District had been asking me for about 5 years if I would want to take this over. My ex-wife and I ran the Christmas tree farm just north of here. I had a full-time job at the time as a mechanic. And in 2002, I retired from working as a mechanic. And in August, they said, hey, you know, take a look at the orchard. So I, for the first time, set foot on this property and walked through, and I fell in love. You know, it was, to me, something a lot more intriguing and compelling than the Christmas tree. They said that you could go from the cradle to the grave on chestnuts alone. So they would build cradles from chestnut wood and coffins from chestnut wood. People would be buried in them. So in 1906, the chestnut blight was introduced to the Bronx Zoo through some Chinese trees that were imported. They didn't really have any sanitation as far as botanical sanitation, so they didn't do any testing or quarantine or anything like that. Once it started, it ravaged the entire American chestnut throughout its habitat, and it destroyed all of them within about 15 years. And they were so numerous that they supported entire communities, not just from the chestnuts themselves, which would be harvested and bagged and then put on trains and sent up to New York or to the cities and used as food for the households. They'd make it into flour, dry them, and crush them, mill them into flour. So not just the food crop, but the wood is one of the most durable woods that you can imagine. They're wind pollinated. The tree has both male and female flowers. The female flowers are what we see in the burrs growing, and then the male flowers are these catkins, and they do produce pollen and nectar. Not all flowers produce nectar, so they actually do attract my honeybees, which I have here, and they do make a fantastic honey. Many honeys will be flavored by, they'll taste kind of like the fruits of the plants that they get the nectar from. The chestnut honey is just really warm, deep, delicious, very earthy flavor. I liken it to pecan pie. The tubes are to protect the seedlings, and again, I don't want to embarrass myself by showing you a dead tree. Nope. See, this is one of the smaller ones. So that's for watering. So we have to protect them from voles and rabbits and such foraging on them. Voles are the worst. Voles are like a small mouse or a large mouse, small rat, and they just they'll eat the whole tree. They're worse than rabbits. This is Chewy, by the way. Chewy and I are new to each other this year. We were introduced back in January. He was a rescue. He's done me a lot of good. These 4 trees are the 4 Americans. And you can tell the different types, the different varieties by looking at the leaves. And some of them have grafted on different varieties. Like this branch here looks to be Japanese from the small leaf. It's very narrow and toothy. Whereas if you look at these over here, get a good one. They're narrow at the base and they're broad at the end. Very, very toothy. This is American chestnut, Castaña dentata. So the dentata being teeth, so it's very toothy. The Chinese trees up here have a larger leaf and they're broad all the way down, from the stem all the way down to the tip. Different shapes. Also color. Shine, these are all different attributes. I'm not very good at it, but there are people that can run circles around me as far as identifying trees by the leaf and stem patterns. You see on the tip here, you've got these little.
Yeah, what are those?
So those are the female flower pistils, and that's what gets pollinated. And if they get pollinated, it'll produce a nut. If they don't, you get an empty shell, flat empty shell. So that's not pollinated. That one got pollinated. Wow. And then again, right there, that's the pistils from the female flower. Wow. And the female flower grows into that burr. When they're young, it's just like this little tiny spiky ball, and then you can see the male flowers grow on the same stems. You can see a few of them sticking out here.
That's what they are. Oh, okay. I was wondering what that was.
So in the early days, I would get people that had been coming here for many years, and they were happy to see that there was somebody here managing things. And there was this one guy, Mario, old Italian guy, and he was in his 80s. He's passed away a few years ago now. But Mario, he was one of these guys. He'd come out, and he had the trees that he wanted to go to. One day he comes in here, and I gave him these 5-gallon buckets, and he gathered 3 5-gallon buckets, which hold about 35 to 38 pounds each. 3 of them in an hour, by himself. Old man in his 80s. Then there was another couple that would come in, and they were some of the first customers I ever got. And I had this old tin shed that was out there. It's gone now, and I was charging like $2 a pound. I mean, just to kind of give the idea, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, things are a little bit different, and so I just enough to kind of give them that flavor. And these old folks come up, and they get out of the car, and they're these little tiny Korean people, and they're in their 80s or 90s, and they didn't speak any English at all. Of course, I don't speak any Korean, or didn't speak any at all, and And okay, they're, it's $2 a pound, and they're nodding and laughing and speaking in Korean. I didn't know what they were saying. I don't know if they knew what I was saying, but they just kind of wave and they keep on walking. They come on back here. This is the first thing in the morning. About 4:30 rolls around, 5 o'clock rolls around, and I'm wondering, what happened to these old people, I'm starting to get worried. So I close up my shed out there and, lock up the register, and I start walking back here. And about halfway back to the trees, here comes this old lady, and she's got 2 of those, those 50-pound rice bags, those cloth rice bags, right? She's got 2 of those, one on each shoulder, and she's just walking along. And she looks up and she smiles and she talks to me in Korean, and we go over and I help her unload. I'm thinking, where's the old man? What happened to him? And of course she couldn't answer me. And so I walk back with her, and he's back here, and he's got 5 more of these 50-pound rice bags. And so she grabs 2 of them, I grab 2 of them, or he grabs 2 of them, she grabs 1, and we hike out, and they were happy to pay for them. They just paid me what I was asking, no complaints, which was kind of unusual. Yeah. And then they would come back week after week, same thing. Show up early in the morning. I give them my wheelbarrow now because I know they're going to be harvesting a lot, and a few years went by, and I still had no idea about them, other than they were great customers, and they were some of my favorite customers. And then one year they didn't show up, and turns out the old man had passed away that year. The following year, the older lady, she comes out with some of her grandchildren. And the grandchildren spoke English, and I'm going, so what's the story? What's the story? And well, it turns out he owned, the couple owns a bunch of apartment buildings in San Francisco that are largely Korean. And Korean culture has a huge, very, very close attachment to the chestnut tree because they grow there naturally. And so they would, harvest them here, bring them up there, and sell them. And they were happy to pay whatever I was asking. They'd pass the cost on to their customers. And then she passed away the following year. But it was kind of fun.
I've been dying to know, what's your favorite chestnut dish or recipe?
It's an Italian, it's a glazed chestnut cake, where it's like a yellow cake, and you take the chestnuts, you boil them or roast them, peel them, and then you grind them into a rough, coarse meal, and you use that as part of the flour. Just a really fantastic. You got that kind of sweet nuttiness, and it's not like other nuts. It's very, very different, very low in fat. It's a low cholesterol. They're gluten-free. The next one was a chestnut chanterelle mushrooms, wild mushrooms, and then they use chestnut flour and then chestnut, like coarse chestnut, ground up in the filling. But the chestnut flour is used to make the pasta that makes the ravioli, and that was just really fantastic.
We reached the Horseshoe Loop Trail that runs around the perimeter of the lake and is home to many different songbirds, such as orange-crowned warblers, golden-crowned sparrows, and dark-eyed juncos. Horseshoe Lake is habitat to waterfowl such as the American coot, pied-billed greedy, and a variety of ducks. This raft of ringneck ducks are medium-sized diving ducks with black upper parts, a weakly tufted purple-black head, black neck, upper breast, and tail, a hard-to-see cinnamon collar, white lower breast and belly, pale gray sides, and a blue-gray bill with a white ring near the black tip. It spends the winter in California. I want to say thank you to Hans Josens for sharing his stories with us, and Mike Hunt for shooting the video with me so we could edit with dual cameras, and also for his expert naturalist advice on the trails. So I have one last question for you. What did you most enjoy learning about today? The choices are: number 1, the Christmas tree restoration project; number 2, the wildlife on the trails; number 3, the Chestnut tree farm; and number 4, all of the above. So again, go to your polling tab, click on your choice to have it recorded, and then go back to the YouTube tab. All right, it looks like the most popular answers were Chestnut tree farm and all of the above. Fantastic. So I just want to let you know that this presentation and other park tours are available at BAO's webpage, which is shown here. So it's just going to our website and using /videos.